Alrighty, hello everybody, geeks and geekettes, or the general audience as it were. Welcome to Geeking This number 5. Today we'll be talking about the Orville and possibly finishing up the many adventures of Walt's frozen head as well. With me is my buddy and fellow geek, Mr. Tony.
Hey everybody,
Hey, sir, how you doing?
pretty good.
Tony suggested to me that I should watch The Orville, being a sci-fi fan. Mostly a Star. I would really identify myself as a Star Wars guy. How about you, sir? Would you say like your main sci-fi thing would be Star Wars?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, but I grew up in a household with lots of Trekkies, lots of fans of Star Trek. My siblings were. Starting from they didn't really do. I suppose my dad watched classic Star Trek back in the day, the Kirk stuff, and I'm sure that's what got everyone the ball rolling. Actually, quick anecdote, if I can.
Of course.
The very first, so how my family got into Star Wars is really awesome. I think mostly my dad was a Harrison Ford fan, having seen him in like American Graffiti. My dad did not see the first Star Wars, actually. Actually, what happened is he saw Empire Strikes Back in the theater, and this was with my mom, and I think it had to been either my two elder brothers and my eldest sister, and they were kids at the time. I don't know how young. I imagine they were be pretty young, but that was like their first introduction to Star Wars. And then of course I grew up on it with like VHS tapes in the house, just rewatching over and over. So we're a Star Wars family, but Star Trek was always there as well. And I think my dad watched the classic series, and then it picked up. Mostly it was sort of my sister's bag. My brother Trey is a Star Trek guy, but my other brothers weren't into Star Trek that much. It's really groundbreaking, especially if you are a female, because there's a lot of female roles in Star Trek. So my sisters were more mainly into Star Trek, and our the boys were into wars, and I was the youngest, so I'm into both. But
Got the best of both worlds. That's awesome.
yeah, exactly. So my sisters really got into the fandom with Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is the Patrick Stewart incarnation. He's Captain Picard, and then just taking off from there. They loved every Star Trek that followed. Maybe not so much Voyager or Enterprise or even Discovery's out now, which I want to actually start to watch that, but I haven't gotten around to it. So it's kind of weird that I bring up Star Trek. I don't really want to, but watching these episodes, it's really in the forefront of my mind. So I have to ask you this myself. I already gave sort of my background. What is your knowledge on Star Trek, sir?
That's a really. I can give you a short answer. None. So, and that's not because I. That's not because I didn't like it. It was mainly because I wasn't exposed to it. So my only relationship with Star Trek goes as far back as whatever was on TV at the time. And as I was like scrolling through the channels when I was a little kid, and I would see it and I didn't understand it, so I just kind of would skip forward. I never really had a connection with Star Trek. And it wasn't until the new series, the new trilogy came out, that I actually watched anything Star Trek related. So it's funny because I know where you're going with this discussion. The Orville, of course, is very much inspired by Star Trek, and it's funny because, again, I haven't seen anything related to Star Trek except for that first movie that came out recently. Well, like 10 years ago. But even I, who doesn't have any connection with Star Trek, can be like, yeah, this is totally a homage to Star Trek.
Yes, and if you framed it as such, and it really is. I think what's funny is you're the elder brother in your family, so you get to decide more or less what's on the TV.
Right.
Whereas me, I'm the youngest, I was kind of forced to, well, not forced. I did watch it, and I could have gone and played, but I watched some Star Trek.
Yeah,
Just
I
with my
can't
siblings.
I can't really give you a definitive answer why, man. Honestly, like you're right. I did control the remote control literally, but I think I was more into like cartoons, like Nicktoons and the Cartoon Network and the live action stuff never really hit me except for like maybe Seinfeld, which I guess I was a weird kid. I like that. But Star Trek, I don't know, man. It didn't really get my interest until I was like maybe like a teenager, and even then it was like, nah, I'm more of a Star Wars dude.
Um, so Star Trek was the very first show, and I was young, of course. But I remember watching it. Remember thinking this is a little more adult, but I still sort of enjoy it. And it was the first show I watched that I was thinking, hey, this show is trying to say something. You know how like stories or analogies try to
Yes.
say something. This show's trying to say something. And
Okay.
one of the most classic episodes, even from James Kirk's run of the classic Star Trek, the one that I can pinpoint out is a very like racially charged one, or well, alien, so I guess specially charged one, where there's these two warring factions, and they're black and white aliens split down the middle. One half is black, one half is like ebony, I should say, and one half is white, and they are fighting a different, uh, exact opposite themselves, which is like maybe the right side is black, whereas the right side is white with one alien, and then it's just the exact same alien group, just with different varying colors, black and white on either sides, and it sort of pinpointed out how ridiculous sort of racially charged fighting is, and I just remember episodes like that being like, oh, I understand what this is trying to say.
That's really freaking cool. I had no idea about that episode. I love that, and I could totally see now that you explained that brief characterization of Star Trek and the story it means behind it, how it directly ties into the Orville because they're doing something in a much sillier way.
Yes, yes.
But the point is there's a story, there's a meaning behind it, and
Uh,
that's powerful.
so yeah, so a lot of these things is gonna be for me for the Orville, like a sort of like the Simpsons did it, but like Star Trek did it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But like it's not taken away from the Orville at all. If anything, I'm wagering to bet. I haven't watched any Discovery right now that's on the CBS streaming service, but I'm willing to bet that the Orville has maybe more to say than the newest Star Trek series, because I assume the newest Star Trek series is the series now that they are producing, kind of like the J.J. Abrams movies are just purely sort of fan service, and I don't feel like they're having anything more to say. Whereas the Orville, I think they're getting some messages across.
All right, so that's a good introduction. So, yeah, before
Yes,
we started recording, you said that you had made it all the way up to episode 5?
yes. So let's break down these episodes. I will keep my Star Trek to a minimum, but I will reference something if it's a good point.
Yes, please do.
So the very first episode's called Old Wounds. It starts off with our hero, Ed Mercer, played by Seth MacFarlane, coming home, just in a futuristic city. I was like, oh, okay, we get to see a day in the life of whatever he's doing. And then, of course, this day in his life turns out that his wife at the time has an affair with him, and with like a blue alien, and then he comes in, and it's just a ridiculous opening that I would totally caught me off guard. And I think it gives us a time frame, a time jump, and it's on the screen. And then it goes through like the aftermath of Ed Mercer dealing with that. What I didn't know at the time, and this episode reveals this sort of twist, is that this is sort of a main plot point for the whole series. And then his wife actually turns out to be one of the cast, the crew of the Orville, and it's just ridiculous that. So when it happened, I was like, oh, okay, so that gives him some sort of motive to like get his shit straight and fly right, but then it becomes this whole underlying theme to the whole series.
Yeah, actually, I thought the same thing too. When I first saw that, I thought that was more of like a motivating factor for him to clean up his act, and also just kind of serve as a classic Seth MacFarlane gag. I mean, you got this alien dude just like just oozing blue, which is so gross, because that means something else. But it actually has a foundational purpose to the entire story arc, which is
Yes,
interesting.
definitely.
And you know what? As I know you're only up to episode 5, but it's interesting the way they weave the story and kind of integrate that. But it doesn't. It's not like beating on the dead horse. They build
No,
upon that. It's really interesting. Like
if
even as
anything,
far.
it's the backstory of the characters, and then you have to just understand that that happened. And
Yeah.
I feel
Well.
like it is leading to something, and they're putting little hints here as to what's gonna happen. I think in the future with Mercer, and I'll try to tell you what my guesses are. Having been 5 episodes in, after we do all these episodes.
Okay.
But okay, so in this episode, we see the Orville, we get to experience the Orville. We meet the crew, and I just would like to go through and talk about our favorites.
Okay.
So one of my first favorites I have to talk about is Lieutenant Malloy. He is hilarious,
Oh, he's
even
the
more
best.
so than Mercer. Mercer actually does a little more straight laced comedy this time around. He's not so outrageous as well I'm used to seeing him as. And so Malloy is more a bumbling idiot, but very charming. He is played by the great Scott Grimes, and as I've noticed actors in this, and Scott Grimes is one of these actors that I take notice of because I believe I said this before, but I'll say it again and again and again. You, sir, must watch Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers.
Yes, I don't care. A lot of people try from it. Of course, it's the brainchild of Tom Hanks' HBO limited run series that was on back in the day. If you loved Saving Private Ryan, you'll definitely love Band of Brothers. And I know it's a touchy subject because it's war, it's graphic, but it's also
Yeah.
very historical and I don't know, it's very emotionally driven, and the characters are really great, and then you build these likings to these characters, and it's war, so shit goes down. And these characters are based on real life veterans, and the stories told in Band of Brothers are pretty much from their transcripts of what they written down in journals and shit.
Oh
So
wow.
if you watch it, I take a fucking take a Veterans Day, take any sort of uh, American holiday to sit down and watch it. And sometimes they play it on the History channels on those days because I take it as my patriotic duty to watch it sometimes because it is really that driven and
Damn.
that realistic, and those characters are just really great. Um, and just my goal in life, I want to write. I want to be an aspiring writer. Just sort of waiting for a muse to hit me at the moment. But if I could write a fictional war epic that is as great as Band of Brothers, that's one of my goals in life, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a noble goal to have, man. I hear you.
But
I,
that's Band of Brothers is so good because it actually happened and the atrocities actually happened
right.
there.
Right.
So it's gonna be hard to fictionalize that. But freaking Band of Brothers, if you haven't seen it, haven't heard about it, give it a watch. It's great. And Lieutenant Malloy plays Scott Grimes plays a character in Band of Brothers, and he's just really good. I remembered his portrayal in that, and so when he popped up in Orville, I was like, oh great, this is a good cast so far.
Yeah.
So another one of my personal favorites is Alara. Alara is sort of OP. I guess she's if you're using Star Trek language, she is the Worf in this situation. Maybe Worf crossed between Data. So what that means is Worf and Data are both strong because one's an android, one's a Klingon. But she's also super smart as well, like Data.
Yeah.
And she is just Data and Worf usually solve any sort of muscly bound problem that the Star Trek crew sort of face.
Muscly bound problem. I like that.
Yes, and Alara does that, and what's even better is, of course, she is a female alien, and just like her interactions with Mercer and like their respect towards each other is really good. Actually, one of my favorite episodes, which is the second one coming up, is deals with Alara.
Yeah, she has a typical background as well.
Yeah.
If I may, one of my favorites is actually he's played by Jay Lee. It's Lieutenant John. What is that guy's name? John Lamar.
Yes, Lamar is good. I like the Malloy and Lamar broship that's happened. So
I
it's
love
freaking
that.
awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoy that chemistry.
When you told me it's like if me and Edgar and you were taking command of like a Star Trek ship,
Isn't
that
that what you think of?
relationship, like it's like that's totally it. If you were Lamar and I was Malloy or something, that's basically
Yeah,
it. Just
yeah.
riffing off each other while like doing some sort of job.
Science-y shit.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, that's a good. Any other personal favorites for you, sir?
No, those are probably my top. I can tell you this. I don't know if I want to open up this kind of worms just this moment, but I will leave it and then we can get back to it later. And that is at the beginning, up until the first few episodes, probably where you are, episode 5. I didn't like one character so much, but then as the series continued up until season 2 as well, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the second season, he became one of my favorites, and that's Bortus. So it's interesting
Oh,
how like
great. Yeah,
it go ahead.
he's a rough like at first, but I think he's growing on me already here at episode 5.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely grows on you. Like, I don't know why. Like, and that was going to be one of my questions about we can move forward now and just go through the episodes. But there's the interesting dynamic is for some reason, not just you, because you told me before we recorded, you didn't really like the Bortus episodes, and neither did I. And so it's interesting because as the series progresses, something happens, and I can't pinpoint what it is, but he becomes special and he grows on me, and to the point where it's like, damn, this guy's he's funny, he's good, he's a deadpan guy, but I love that kind of humor.
I think the episode leading right after the Bortus heavy episode, he turns into because he definitely has a story arc in that episode which he changes, and I think that the resulting change is a likable character, or what I find more likable, anyways.
Yes, that's
I
probably
think I
it.
think that's what happens. Okay, so first episode. Oh, another shout out I have to say for one of my favorite characters is Dr.Finn. And you were
Oh
saying,
yeah.
oh, Orville has this alumni of Star Trek casts and
Yep.
writers, and Dr. Finn's played by Penny Johnson Jerald, who plays the wife of my favorite Star Trek captain. Actually, he's a commander of my favorite commander in Star Trek, and my favorite series in Star Trek was Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and she plays Cassidy Sisko, is the wife to Commander Sisko in Deep Space Nine.
See that isn't that interesting? I feel like she's like really good with her acting in this show, just because I mean she probably has experience, obviously.
Yes, and to table a conversation for next time around, if you ever want to get into any sort of Star Trek, my suggestion would be to start at Star Trek Deep Space Nine. For
Okay.
me, it's the most modern telling. A lot of it actually, from the episodes I watched of the Orville, remind me of Deep Space Nine, and it's just
Oh,
they had the great cast and they had the great formula, Star Trek formula down, and it's just one of the best Star Trek series in my opinion. It takes place on Deep Space Nine is a space station home to thousands of alien races. So usually in Star Trek, it's on the ship like the Orville, and like on the Orville you have couples, you might have spouses, and maybe even in Deep Space Nine is pretty much a congregation. It's a really a Denmark of sorts, or one of those safe countries where all the alien species and races gather, and then it's just the crew of Deep Space Nine dealing with the politically charged shit that happens while running an alien space station, as you would gather. Many shit would happen. During the series, there's a whole sort of war going on as well.
Damn. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I need to track that down because that's always been, I guess, not a problem for me, but more of a confusion, as in where the hell do I start if I wanted to watch this show.
That's a good starting point. One of the first, there was a handing of the torch in the first episode of Deep Space Nine. Captain Picard and the Enterprise actually have cameoed in many episodes of Deep Space Nine, including the first episode, and sort of a passing of the torch. So if you watch Deep Space Nine, you can go back and be like, hey, I wonder how that series is or the other series are.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, so that was great seeing her. I'm like, oh, that's Sisko's way. So I'm trying to take Star Trek out of the equation, but it keeps popping up. Anyway, so in this first episode, they go over to some planet where there is a time device that could be used as a weapon, and it is used as a sort of a weapon, as we saw, that sort of fast forwards time in a certain ray. It's like a time ray, I would call it. We get the first hint of the major enemy. So if this being classic Star Trek, rather, the major enemy would be the Klingon in here, or the Vulcans, and here it is the Krill, which is just, from my understanding, I've seen them just masked soldiers up to this point.
Yeah, the Krill are going to continue popping in and out of this series, and I love the way that, God, I'm telling you, man, this show just like, it's layers. It builds upon itself to the point where, like, when you're finished with one episode and you have some sort of preconceived notion of like, okay, I think I understand who they are and what they are, but then they just kind of do a 180-degree turn later on, and it's so cool. It's just always surprising me, this show.
Yes, and definitely, I would say Star Trek builds upon itself as well, and as most good shows should now. They should have at least. I know sometimes you don't know what the run of a show is going to be, but you should still have some overarching doom or trajectory that you're going for. And trying to rewatch Deep Space Nine, I remember the first season is sort of slow going because there's a lot of world building.
Yes.
But at the last season, like most TV series, especially Game of Thrones, that's happening right now. In the last season, everything just falls into place, and oh my god, it's just orgasmic.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, and I assume I feel like this train is just rolling for me for the Orville, so I can see that happening as well. So they end with Happy Arbor Day, and this one destroying the enemy. And it's great to see that. I have her cast name right here. The Mercer's ex-wife, who is Commander Grayson, of course. Her, Commander Grayson, and Mercer's interaction with each other, just their on and off again liking of each other, and just seeing them work professionally with each other is pretty cool on the Orville itself, which I think is the sort of main idea behind the first episode, was that they're able to push past their shit and actually vanquish evil.
Get you done. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. All right, so next episode. Any thoughts on the first episode? What were your feelings when you were introduced to the Orville?
When I was first introduced to it, like I said, like the first episode kind of seemed really silly, so I wasn't sure if it was gonna be, well, I liked it, and I felt like because I had seen reviews before that said, just stick until episode three, and so I made that commitment to myself to at least make it to episode three. And so as I got to episode three and four, four is when I was just glued. Um, so these first couple episodes were like good for me, and I liked them a lot. But it wasn't until episode four when I was like, this is like one of the best shows on TV right now, in my own personal opinion, because I hadn't seen something mixture of Twilight Zone, which I really, really like a lot, that series, with like a modernistic take of like plus like humor.
Yeah, so it got so sci-fi sort of analogies down, and I think that's what's important with something as fantastical as this. You got to have some sort of analogy message across. Definitely in Twilight Zone, that is the case. I would also like to shout out Black Mirror is also
Oh yeah.
famous for that. And yeah, that's what good sci-fi writing does. Good, it's actually what good horror writing does. To sort of ground these fantastical things that we're watching, there has to be some um, sort of earthly message, as it were. So yeah, so it's just great writing altogether. I know Seth writes a lot for it. It just it's it's good at what it does. It takes the Star Trek formula and it plays with it, and that's what I like about it. It's doing its own thing. Okay, so let's try to get through these relatively fast. So the second episode is called Command Performance. This is my favorite episode. So second episode in, it already hits my favorite episode. So the premise of this episode is, I think, Mercer and Grayson, Commander Grayson, his ex-wife, have to go investigate something. They leave Alara in charge, and when you leave Alara, when you leave someone in charge on a ship, you don't know how long it's going to be. It could be just like for like, I don't know, 30 minutes while you go check some shit out, or really, really long time. And
Yeah.
Bortus in this episode is apparently laying an egg because he's a all male species, and
Yeah.
that's what they do to populate. We'll get more on that in a minute. But he's sitting on an egg right now. He's the next in line of command, but after
That's
him would be Alara.
yes.
Actually, I think he could have put someone else in charge, but I'm not exactly too sure. So Buddy does put Alara in charge. This is another classic Star Trek formula, especially some of my favorite episodes in Deep Space Nine, just because it's a space station and they can't really go anywhere. Sometimes Commander Sisko has to go and do some shit, so you leave someone in charge. And then, as we see, especially in this Orville episode, all hell breaks loose. It was an interesting episode because it's a cross between one of my favorite Star Trek tropes as well as one of my favorite Futurama episodes of all time, I think.
What, the zoo part?
Yeah, so exactly. So in this episode, turns out while Mercer and Grayson are investigating something, they actually get caught and trapped and put into like a multi-species animal alien zoo because this alien race sees that all other races are inferior, but not inferior as to way to like kill them or whatever, but inferior in the way as they just see them as animals and something to look at.
Yes.
And they just get thrown into that situation, and it's my favorite episode. It just reminded me of that Futurama episode where Fry and Leela they don't really get captured. They Fry and Leela like get like a coupon for a couples retreat, and that ends up happening. What it is,
Oh.
they're in a zoo enclosure.
Yeah,
This
I
is
do
one of the
remember
newer
that.
seasons of Futurama, and that just reminded me of it. It's hilarious. So it's Star Trek. It is Star Trek. It's grounded in like those tropes, but it's lighthearted, and I love the dichotomy of this. It can be lighthearted, but it can also be super serious when it wants to.
Yeah, I think that's like my favorite part about it. That balance works really well, and they it's hard to do, but they do a good job of it.
Yeah, so Star Trek is purely straight laced, and with Star Trek you'll get funny characters, but there's most of the time there's nothing funny about Star Trek. Alrighty, so that is my favorite episode. And then we go into the Bortus heavy episode. So
Yeah,
females in Bortus's race are this episode. So last episode was called Command Performance. This episode is called About a Girl.
yeah,
And in this episode,
pretty messed up.
Bortus and his life partner give hatch. I would say I was going to say give birth. They hatch a female of their staff. This is the first episode where I thought, okay, this the Orville's trying to say something with this story, and
Right.
I guess where it misses the mark. So they undergo with the problem of there being a female of their species, and there's supposed to be a sex change for the baby, and they have to go into first. Bortus is all for it, and Mercer kind of gives them a drag about, oh, you can't do that to the baby.
Well, what I think is hilarious is they try and convince him and they fail. And the only reason Bortus is able to change his mind is after watching the freaking Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes,
I
yes,
like
that's
that.
my favorite part. Malloy shows him Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh, like that's all right to be different.
I like that Bortus and the robot. What is his name? 1 second.
Uh,
I just have it.
God, yeah, no,
Isaac, of course.
Isaac.
Yeah, so I love that Bortus and Isaac sort of pick up human traits and human things because they're around these humans that teach them these sort of things.
Yeah.
Showing them Rudolph. Actually, damn, that's not my favorite episode, but on the fifth episode, that's probably my favorite part of my episode with Isaac. I'll get to that in a bit. But so yeah, so he watches Rudolph and then gets inspired, and that's really great. I guess the trial is great too, and I kind of saw that famous writer of that planet's twist kind of come along when they brought in
Oh yeah.
her into the jury. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's a great argument right there. That their most famous writer that they always quote, they
He's a female.
think is a man. It's actually a female of their species. So I saw this going one way. I thought it was okay, seal deal. We're not going to change the sex of this baby, but they end up doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. And
I thought that was actually, let's see, different and fresh. I mean, it sucks. It's a kind of not a quote unquote happy ending, but at the same time, it's like we would have expected that. It would have been a trope if they had go and did not perform the surgery, but the fact that they went through with it is kind of like, well, that's probably what would have actually happened if this was a real situation.
I think that's good. I think that's why I liked it. I didn't like well, the trial had funny bits, but I didn't like the trial so much. But yeah,
Yeah.
deciding that they had to do it anyways, that is more realistic. And then I think the overall message of that story is, well, this kid's still going to decide who it's going to be. We can't decide that for it.
Yeah.
And that's good. And that this was the first episode that I felt like it was saying something, especially to nowadays. Even though this was season 1 and it was back in, was this couple
2017.
Years ago? 2017. So yeah, so even that is still prevalent now. All right, next episode is a pretty good episode. I think you said this is one of your favorite episodes.
Oh my god,
well. That's my favorite cameo. This one is If the Star Should Appear.
Yes.
So another Star Trek trope is they always visit alien planets and they have to deal with the alien life there, and sometimes have to bring about revelations through to the alien life. But damn, going a lot of back knowledge for Star Trek. Sorry, but Star Trek
right.
is something called the Prime Directive, where you're not supposed to interfere with the planet's life because they have to evolve and change by themselves.
Yes.
So what the crew of usual Star Trek crews do on these series is sort of just kind of tip the scales into the right sort of direction. And I feel like this is what happens on the Orville.
Yeah, so this episode for me is my absolute favorite just because it's so outlandish in terms of like the fantastical nature of the fact that you have a whole colony of people living on a spaceship unbeknownst to themselves. So basically, the story goes that they find this ginormous ship, which also it's freaking cool to see like a giant ship in the show because it kind of brings me back to Star Wars a little bit. And then they try to penetrate it and communicate with it, but they can't electronically, so they actually have to make a manual search inside of the ship, and they get in. And behold, holy crap! It's like a whole planet inside. There's an atmosphere. It's just mind blowing to me, man.
Yeah,
And then and my favorite part is when they can go up to they go up to like say what's up to the locals, and then they just get freaked out then because they don't know that they're who they are.
like an alien from another planet. They never experienced anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then there's of course, there's the politically charged stuff that's happening between.
Oh yeah. I mean,
There's
that's
much
right in my
more
alley.
going on, and
A dictator who's trying to control the
yes,
population, and religion plays a role.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't know why. It sounds familiar. Anyways, so that's going on. This is the first episode that uses another classic Star Trek trope, which is the away team versus the team on ship. And usually there is a splitting apart, and it's just like like any good horror stories, like you gotta keep everyone together, or shit goes down. Definitely, shit does go down. The ship actually has to leave and save someone from the Krill, and then the away team is alone by themselves. Whereas freaking Grayson even gets shot or wounded, and it's just having them to deal with that. And they're even on the planet ship, they are separated to the away team, so from each other. So then it's just really like, oh man, they're getting in a bad situation here.
Yeah, and you said that has your favorite cameo,
Yeah, so
Mr. Neeson.
they have the revelation. They show the revelation to the people that they're on the ship, and by doing it, they'll experience because the ship's enclosed. And it has light or some sort of light technology, so they assume there's always a sky and sun. But when they open it, they actually get to see the stars and experience night for the first time. And in a recorded message, there's Liam Neeson plays a cameo of the commander of the ship at the time, that they just ran out of fuel and they're adrift in space, and they just have enough provisions to live for quite a bit. But however, the people evolved and forgot that they fucking were on a ship.
And the best part is they're freaking headed straight towards a star, is what I
Yes,
remember.
yeah. The critical moment is the Orville had to come and intervene because their huge ass ship is drifting straight into like a sun or a star and will die. So they had to save the people and convince them all the while. But like rather than, and this is true for Star Trek in the Prime Directive sort of way, that you can't just try to like force people and like teleport them onto the Orville or whatever. You have
Right.
to make them see this revelation for themselves.
Yes.
So yeah, that's if the second episode was my favorite, this was definitely a close second for me.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that, because
And then
I was.
it just keeps on getting better after that
Yeah.
because
Episode 5.
episode five's the Priya episode, and this
Yes.
is with special guest star Charlize Theron who plays Priya, and this is definitely not another A Million Ways to Die in the West. So when the last time I saw them together, anyways. So Priya, a lot of the times that's how they introduce people on Star Trek. They're like, "Oh, we need help," and you meet them and stuff. And usually it's cameos, especially back in the day. There's a lot of cameos from famous actors that, like, of course, I didn't know as a kid watching Star Trek episodes, but when I look back now, it's like, oh shit, he cameoed. He was in a Star Trek episode. So a lot of famous actors got their start in Star Trek episodes, or even famous actors of the times cameoed in them. And so this is one of those episodes where Charlize Theron plays one of these characters, and it's just I think Grayson has her first suspicions of Priya because then she saves everybody and is really skillful, but it just seems like it's like too good to be true sort of thing. Especially if she noticed that Mercer and Priya sort of has a relationship that's going on.
Yeah,
And I was like, what is going on here? There must be something more. And of course,
there
she
is.
is right. Yes, her suspicions are grand. And this happens in Star Trek too. Just to name some Star Trek frenemies, as it were. Q is a cosmic entity in Next Generation who poses as a human alien, but turns out to be this entity that wants with people. So that's one of them. There's a lot more characters like this in Star Trek. But yeah, but we find out, and this is what I love about this episode, that Priya comes from. We just got off of watching Endgame, so this is this is
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Priya is from a different time altogether. She is from the future. She knew that the Orville was going to actually die in the sort of storm or anomaly that she saved the ship from, and so she knows exactly what to do. And however, it's not just to save them, because that would be fucking with the timeline, but it's to save them so that she can black market their ship in the future, which is just an awesomely ridiculous concept.
I know, like travel back in time to like hijack a ship that was doomed anyway, and you're gonna go ahead and just sell it. Like I thought that was freaking phenomenal. And
Yeah,
what the outcome of that means is, well, that means that all those people on the Orville would have perished, but now because they don't want to fuck with the timeline, they have to live in the future, which is also
yeah. So
crazy to
this
me.
is a really ridiculous. I think it changes the sort of trajectory of the show. So when I first run the revelations first were coming, I was like, oh, she's from the future. I was like, okay, that's a good thing. She was saving them. But then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna sell your ship. I'm like, oh shit. So
Like,
I
wait,
thought
what?
what was gonna happen is maybe I knew they were gonna keep the Orville because goddamn the show is called the Orville. But
Right.
I thought either Mercer was gonna convince her not to, or they were gonna escape within the future and be the Orville in the future. I thought that would be a freaking awesome way to go for the show.
Right.
But however, they actually escape within the past still. They just go back through the time sort of black hole and are back in the past and send Priya on her way. And then, but that still changes everything because they were meant to die. So it's interesting what's going to happen now. That's why I stopped at this episode. I was like, oh, this is a good point to stop here.
Yeah, I think I agree with that 100%. And it's kind of messed up because that means that like Priya's future is now completely changed as a result of the fact that the Orville crew survived. So,
Yeah.
which I think that means she disappears, right?
Yes, that's why she disappears on the bridge of the Orville. My question to you is, having been through the series already, do you think the Orville surviving was a good thing or a bad thing?
It was absolutely the necessary thing.
Oh, good.
Like not even good or bad. It was foundational to the universe.
Is there any sort of hints at the rift that happens, or it's just sort of business as usual as the episodes progress?
They don't go back into that. Uh, let's see. It loops around at some point. Let me see. I'm
Oh,
scrolling
that's
through.
good.
Um,
Well, while you research that, I'm going to talk
it's you know
about.
what? I would actually say surprisingly, and this isn't gonna make you happy, but it loops around in season two.
Oh, okay. Well, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. I'll be happy if they referenced it later on. If they don't reference it at all, I'd be like, oh, okay, that they need to talk about it.
Well, I wouldn't say that they reference it per se, but it's they go back to that theme and it's
Oh, good.
important. Yeah, it's important that they survive for the future episodes. Like
Oh,
obviously, besides the
good.
fact that it's the Orville, obviously you can't have a show about a dead crew, but it's important because they are more important than themselves. If that makes any sense.
That is awesome. Like they are sort of the tipping point was just like Endgame, just like
Hmm.
If something happens,
Exactly.
something small happens here, it's gonna make a big difference in the future.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So before we end, I have to talk about my favorite. This is a really good episode too. Oh man.
Because of the gag.
So so one of my favorite parts in this episode deals with Isaac, who is an android species. So much like a Data, he's learning about human life. He's here for diplomacy reasons and to learn life, as well as being a crew member. And he doesn't understand humor, so they're trying to make Isaac understand humor. And Malloy, of course, my favorite character, decides, "Hey, I'm gonna teach
Oh,
fucking
pranks.
humor, just practical joke." And
Yeah.
he plays a practical joke on Isaac putting Mr. Potato Head pieces on his face. Harmless, fun. Isaac's like, what? And then Malloy says, now you have to do something unexpected, be creative. And
Yeah.
then the creative thing that he does is Malloy wakes up without one of his legs.
Leg. That was my
Oh
favorite
my
part.
god! And then
I thought that was.
when it shows up again, I was just cracking up.
No, he's like, what the hell?
He's like, just forget that.
You
Oh
know,
my god!
I really like that part, but I also just like the fact that like the way Isaac looked with the stupid Mr. Potato Head gear. That shit
Yes.
was funny.
And then I was thinking of, but it's a practical joke, but she did bodily harm to a person. But I was thinking even then, but like that was a great joke. I love Isaac now. And then
Yeah.
in a point of the time, he gets disabled, and it's all a ruse to sort of take down Priya. And then, but Malloy doesn't know that, and Malloy thinks Isaac's down for the count, and he says to him in the sick bay because he has one leg, and Isaac's down. That he says that was actually a pretty good joke in retrospect, even though I have one leg.
He did. He did say that.
Those sort of
It,
interactions with the crew is, I think, what sets this apart. I mean, there's interactions
yeah,
with Star Trek's crew, but this is ridiculously fun.
it's well done, dude. It's funny. Like they, and so what I if you think about it in hindsight, actually, like now I'm not sure if Isaac was actually thinking about this, but it is kind of harmless because they could just regrow his leg because it's the freaking future and they can like do anything with like medical
Yeah,
science.
how he's walking around with like a Deadpool leg at one point. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So I love that. So yeah, I think that's a good episode for you to stop. And it's just my opinion, man. It gets better and better.
Nice. I'm excited for it. Yeah, just looking back on those episodes I watched, there was a lot of my favorites. A lot of good things I can pinpoint out. And if there's something like that in a show, it's a good show. So before we actually leave today, I would like to just get your impressions on. I know you watched the many adventures of Walt's Head, so I just want to get your initial impressions on, and then I'll say my last things on it, and then we'll sign off from there.
So I only have like 20, probably right at near the, but I gotta say one of the best introductions I've seen in a movie, and that's only maybe I'm biased,
Oh, that's a
just because I love Disneyland. Everybody knows free,
yes.
but it's so well done. What the budget of this movie is, but gosh, it looks very polished. Like I was honestly expecting like a handy cam type of film, but it was professionally
Yes.
produced and such a silly story, so stupid if you think about it, but it's so good. It works. Can you believe it? I love Walt. He's just I don't know. It's what I would really truly expect of Walt Disney if he was a film.
Yes.
That's how I think I would expect him to act. And
I'm glad you said it because I had a similar feeling.
yeah, similar reaction to it. The main character, I don't remember his name, but
It is Peter, and I remember because I am Peter.
well, Peter he's kind of a let's see, he has a great heart, a good nature, but he's also kind of not dumb, but like ditzy, I think. Just because he has
Ditzy, I would say cowardly. He's just a sort of straight-laced guy.
yeah, and then he's kind of like a jerk to his family.
Oh
But
yeah, that's true.
I hope that this is because he's afraid of losing his job, which he says, and but I think he's taking the right turn because where I left off, he finally kind of decides to go with his daughter, who asked to go with him to a change. I think he was like really against it, and so I think he kind of was all right. You can come with me to do something kind of dangerous. That shows that you know what, maybe he's taking a step in the for all.
So yeah, that is definitely the sliding down to its resolution. Yeah, it's I like that part and the whole there's interactions with Walt and his daughter at the park that are freaking phenomenal. Because Pete has to go and cover up their tracks or something. I forget which, but it's awesome. And just when they get to Disney World, they're filming on location like they have been, but then now you're actually seeing rides and stuff, and it's just mind blowing to have them actually do that. And I said in the last podcast that that's what I wanted to do one day. It's like, oh, I go to Disneyland enough. I need to just make a movie there. I almost had a plan down too because we had what's it called, grad night, and I wanted to do that during grad night, make a movie with my friends, but I didn't bring the camera along with me. At that point, I didn't have a fancy phone. We actually used camcorders, and my dad didn't want me to lose it in the park, so didn't get a chance to do that. But I think you've seen what the overall message of Walt's frozen head was about, and I think it comes down to the scene, and I'll just describe the scene so people can actually go ahead and watch the movie on YouTube for free. I mean, it's really good. Peter actually takes the disembodied head of Walt to SeaWorld for the day.
Oh yeah,
in Orlando, and Walt just goes, "Oh, it's so fake." And I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about? Like Disneyland is completely fake. Disney World's completely fake. What are you talking about?"
yeah. This actually has real fishes swimming in water.
Yeah, and the point of it was, I think this is a great message, and I think this plays in line to what Walt embodied and what he would have said himself was that Disneyland may seem fake to us, or Disney World may seem fake, but it's something he created. It's real to him. That is his real main street he grew up on, and those experiences were real to him. So Disneyland is actually much realer place to him, and should be a much more real place to us as well because it was something he created.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. So I think Pete said something like every time they have to go visit the medical, they have to walk through Main Street, which is where you grew up. So
Yes,
that well, the fact that
and definitely visiting these parks as me and Tony do, big time Disney fans here. You definitely you get to appreciate it more. I think I do definitely as I grow up. And then you just notice little things like, oh, I never noticed that before. And walking down Main Street is always the best. I have a better time just walking through Disneyland than I do actually going on rides.
Oh, same here. Absolutely.
Dealing with that all mess, and I'm probably not going for a long time till the fad of Star Wars Land dies out.
Dies down, yeah. That's gonna be nuts.
So, but yeah, then you just appreciate it more, and you come to see it as more of a real place. I mean, you see that it's fake now that you're an adult, but you see it's real to us.
Well, the fact that some guy was able to create this ginormous corporation that's taken over the world, that's a whole other discussion. But the fact that just like a dude, and really he was just an animator, could
just physically wanted to do cartoons.
Yeah, could build this whole place, just get away from for a couple hours. I think it's pretty special.
Yeah, definitely. So it doesn't really fall for me. I guess I was expecting a different movie when I first saw it. Again, like I said before, I was thinking of they could have played it more outlandish, with like, oh my god, it's
Yeah.
his head, and play that more, and people finding him and like reacting to it more, especially in one part that he brings him over to his daughter's birthday party, and that's just ridiculous as well.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But yeah, it was a great portrayal of Walt. I think a great overall message. It's just fun playing with that sort of the urban myth of Walt and the urban myth of, wait, what if he was a frozen head? And it ends with like, oh, there was like another sort of robot suit with a frozen head on it, and like sort of an end credit type thing. And I was like, what is that foreshadowing? I don't know who that could be.
Oh, I don't remember that. Well, I haven't seen it. So.
Well, that's the ending, so it's winding down for you, but mostly is Walt gets to experience uh, and then he gets to experience Walt Disney World with Pete's daughter, and then they're sort of just like Pete gets the job he wanted, and it's all good, and just Walt's like, he's like, okay, I'm gonna have to deal with being a head, but that's all right.
Huh. Nice. Yeah, that I don't know what it would title then.
Yeah. So sweet. I just wanted to talk about it with someone who's seen it, and that's good. He had a lot of initial reactions that I did. So definitely watch that. We're gonna finish up the Orville. Maybe we'll do bigger chunks of episodes at a time now. But yeah, that is it for us. Any last thoughts, Mr. Tony, sir?
No, that's it. I'm just really glad that you are enjoying the show. I know a lot of people it's hit or miss, so I'm glad that you're sticking with it.
So let me know. I am going to bring up Star Trek some more just because that's prevalent for me, but let me know if that gets annoying.
No, I don't. I actually like it.
And maybe me talking about it will actually get you to watch Star Trek too.
Exactly. So keep it up.
Alrighty, so that's it from Geekin This. See you guys later.